Picture this, a crowded room, voices rising, accusations flying like arrows. One man stands motionless in the center, eyes steady, breath even. Within minutes, the storm collapses around him. Accusers trip over their own words, allies expose old grudges, and the entire game shifts without him uttering a single syllable. That man is not passive. He is wielding the oldest, most lethal form of power ever forged, deliberate stillness. In the theater of human ambition, reaction is surrender. Every outburst, every defensive retort, every flushed cheek to your opponent, the map to your soul. The moment you flinch, you confess. The moment you argue, you confirm their narrative. The master of non-reaction flips the script. By refusing to feed the fire, he forces the fire to reveal its true fuel. What people truly want, what they fear, what they will sacrifice. Everything surfaces when left unanswered. History has always crowned the calm. Pericles inherited a city on the brink of total war. Athens buzzed with panic. Demagogues screamed for blood. Allies demanded impossible oaths. Pericles did the unthinkable. He spoke less, moved slower, and let the hysteria burn itself out. While others exhausted their credibility in passionate speeches, he watched motives crystallize. Rivals who plotted his downfall revealed their envy. Citizens who demanded reckless action exposed their short-sightedness. When the plague finally struck and grief threatened to tear the city apart, his measured silence became the anchor that kept Athens from sinking into chaos. He rose not because he shouted louder, but because he refused to shout at all. Abraham Lincoln faced a nation fracturing before his eyes. Senators spat venom, newspapers called him tyrant and fool, generals begged for rash orders. Lincoln's pen stayed quiet. He absorbed the fury without returning it, letting every faction speak until their contradictions hung naked in the air. The very men who tried to manipulate him into premature war or cowardly compromise eventually betrayed their own ambitions in the vacuum he created. His stillness was not weakness. It was the scalpel that cut through decades of political theater. By the time the storm peaked, Lincoln alone understood every player's true price, and he paid none of them. This is your first emancipation. The realization that manipulation thrives only when you participate. The provocateur needs your anger to validate his cause. The critic needs your defense to prove his relevance. The schemer needs your haste to disguise his timing. Withdraw that fuel and the machine stalls. You do not become cold, you become clear. Your mind turns into a mirror so flawless that others see their own distortions reflected back at them. In that mirror they flinch. You do not. The world will test you daily. A colleague drops a veiled insult in a meeting. A partner pushes an old wound to test loyalty. A stranger online baits you into outrage. Each moment is an invitation to hand over your power. The elevated soul declines the invitation. Instead of leaping into the ring, you remain seated in the royal box, watching, learning, deciding from a height no reaction can reach. This is not retreat. This is dominion. The moment you master non-reaction, you stop being a piece on someone else's board and become the hand that moves the pieces. The battlefield does not disappear. It simply rearranges itself around your calm. And in that new geometry, you are no longer the target. You are the unseen architect. No provocation can breach. True power begins where the world ends, at the border of your own mind. Every manipulation is an attempt to storm that border. The manipulator does not attack your body. He attacks your composure. He knows that once your emotions surge, your judgment drowns. The ancient strategists understood this with terrifying precision. Sun Tzu taught that the greatest general wins without fighting, because he refuses to let the enemy dictate the tempo of battle. Your mind is that battlefield. Non-reaction is the fortress wall. Inside that citadel lives a version of you no external force can touch. When criticism arrives wrapped in honeyed concern, when guilt is weaponized as love, when urgency is manufactured to force your signature, the reactive mind scrambles for approval, explanation, rescue. The sovereign mind simply observes the performance. It notices the tremor in the voice, the slight overstatement, the convenient timing. Because it refuses to answer, it hears the subtext the actor never meant to reveal. Consider the quiet genius of Queen Elizabeth I. Surrounded by courtiers who flattered by day and plotted by night, she faced conspiracies that would have broken lesser rulers. Yet she cultivated an almost supernatural restraint. When advisors urged immediate execution of rivals, she paused, sometimes for years. While others reacted with rage or fear, she let the conspirators expose their networks through their own impatience. Each unanswered letter, each delayed decision, became a thread she followed until the entire web lay bare. Her stillness was not indecision. It was the slow, deliberate turning of a lens until every hidden face came into focus. You can build this same citadel. Begin with the smallest provocations. When traffic cuts you off, notice the urge to honk and let it pass like a cloud. When a friend cancels for the third time, feel the sting of disrespect and choose silence over accusation. Each tiny victory strengthens the walls. Soon larger sieges, betrayals at work, emotional blackmail at home find no purchase. The manipulator stands outside shouting, but the drawbridge never lowers. This practice is profoundly liberating. You discover that your peace was never dependent on their behavior. Your dignity was never up for negotiation. The moment you stop reacting, you stop outsourcing your emotional sovereignty. Confidence stops being something you perform and becomes something you inhabit. People sense it instantly. Those who once manipulated you for sport now approach with caution because they can no longer predict or control your next move. Inside the citadel, you also gain something rarer than power: perspective. When you are no longer busy defending yourself, you see the entire landscape. You notice patterns others miss. You understand that most manipulation is born of the manipulator's own insecurity, not your inadequacy. Their urgency is their anxiety wearing a mask. Their criticism is their fear wearing armor. By refusing to engage, you grant yourself the mercy of truth. And truth, once clearly seen, is the ultimate shield. The world will never stop testing the walls. That is its nature. But every test that fails to breach them makes the citadel stronger. You are not becoming untouchable out of arrogance. You are becoming untouchable out of reverence. For your own mind, for your own future, for the version of yourself that history will remember as the one who refused to dance to anyone else's drum. This is the second emancipation. The day your inner world becomes sovereign territory. From that day forward, no one can ever again make you smaller than you truly are. Stillness is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of ascent. Once you have protected your mind and revealed the hidden hands around you, a new horizon opens, one where your non-reaction becomes the very force that elevates you above the crowd. The throne you claim is invisible, yet everyone feels its presence. You do not seize power through noise, you inherit it through gravity. In the final analysis, leadership is the art of being the last calm voice in a noisy room. Those who scream for attention exhaust themselves quickly. The one who waits, listens, and chooses his moment inherits their exhausted followers. Nelson Mandela understood this in the crucible of Robben Island. While fellow prisoners raged against their captors, Mandela studied his guards, learned their language, and maintained a regal composure that even his jailers eventually respected. When freedom finally came, the world did not crown the loudest revolutionary. It crowned the man whose silence had turned suffering into strategy. His stillness had become moral authority so immense that entire nations adjusted their posture in its presence. You walk the same path every day. In the boardroom, when colleagues rush to claim credit or deflect blame, your measured silence draws every eye. In negotiations, when the other side inflates threats or deadlines, your refusal to mirror their panic forces them to reveal their true bottom line. In relationships, when old patterns of guilt or drama reappear, your calm boundary teaches others that your respect is earned, never extorted. Each time you choose not to react, you deposit another stone in the foundation of a reputation that cannot be shaken. This reputation carries a quiet magnetism. People begin to seek your counsel not because you speak often, but because when you do speak, your words carry the weight of someone who has seen through the fog. They trust you because you have never been tricked into hasty alliances or emotional debts. You become the fixed point around which chaos orbits, and chaos, given enough time, always yields to the fixed point. The final liberation is this: non-reaction transforms you from survivor to architect. You no longer spend your energy defending against manipulation. You spend it designing outcomes no manipulator can derail. Your life becomes a deliberate composition rather than a frantic improvisation. Every relationship, every opportunity, every challenge is filtered through the same serene lens. What remains is only what deserves your investment. The rest falls away like leaves in autumn, beautiful, temporary, and no longer your concern. History does not remember the reactive, it remembers the still. Pericles rebuilt Athens, Lincoln preserved a union, Elizabeth stabilized an empire, Mandela reconciled a nation, all because they refused to let the tempests of their time dictate their rhythm. You carry the same potential. The world will always offer drama, urgency, outrage. Your throne is built by declining every offer. Stand in that stillness long enough and something extraordinary happens. The very forces that once tried to move you begin to move with you. Not because you forced them, but because in your presence they remember what steady ground feels like. That is the ultimate protection. Not merely surviving manipulation, but becoming the standard by which all lesser games are measured and eventually discarded. You were never meant to be a puppet in someone else's theater. You were meant to be the quiet director who decides which scenes are even worth performing. The stage is yours now. The lights are on you. And in the grand silence of your mastery, the audience finally understands. The one who refuses to react is the one who writes the ending.